closer you get to your finished product, the sharper your tools need to be. Pernambuco just loves to laugh at you and say, "Hey, I'm gonna tear out right here at the last minute." So you really have to make sure that your planes and your knives are just as sharp as possible. So we're gonna get these done. Well, why I'm thinking about it here too, go ahead and push that like button. Apparently that helps other people find this channel and these videos, so we can share them with more people here. Not quite. Keep going. This blade for the little plane is actually made out of M2 high-speed steel, and it's amazing how this Pernambuco will even round the edge on this. So that's one of the reasons we just have to constantly sharpen things. So move on to my frictionite stones here. One of the really nice things about these stones is that you don't have to keep them wet like you do the Japanese stones. So obviously you couldn't if you put a Japanese stone, any water stone, not just the Japanese stones, on your bench like this, you'd make a mess. So
Sarah says hello again.
Hello, Sarah. Hey, let us know how the audio is today. We went to great lengths yesterday. We had to drive to another city, and they only had one microphone left, so we went ahead and bought it online and then drove over to get it. So hopefully things are sounding pretty good today. Okay, I'm going to switch over to the other side. I'm going to rub these two together, get some nice fresh surface here ready to go.
Jack Estefan from Lebanon is watching.
It's pretty cool to see how far away people are that are watching this. So.
And Tim Holly from Canada. Jack said the sound is great, no noise.
All right.
And Charles Johansson. Sarah said she can't hear the buzz. Razvan Rotar said audio's good.
Well, we're new at this YouTube stuff, especially the stream. You don't get a chance to troubleshoot as easily as you would if you were just videoing these and editing them. So, all right, so we got our blades are nice and sharp. Put these together.
And Shalato from UK is watching too.
From the UK.
Isn't he from the UK?
No, he's from Syracuse, New York.
Is he?
Yes,
I was sure he had an accent.
he does.
Oh. But it's not a New York accent.
It's not a New York accent. Maybe it's a New York accent. That'll let us know. Okay, just got the blade just out, very, very fine cut here. Trying to make sure it's even on both ends here. That feels good. Get this put together.
Dennis Braun over in Spain said that he's watching too. Yeah, Ed said he's from the UK, but now he's in Syracuse.
Yeah.
Oh, Kevin Chen, who's over in Taiwan, said great mic.
Hey, thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, Ed said it's not a New York accent. Oh, tell him what brand mic that we just bought.
This is, I think, blue, and it's called
Yeti Nano.
Yeti Nano. So it was, as soon as you picked up the box, you knew you had something in your hands that was a little bit more of a quality mic than we had before. So.
Ballet Gala said howdy from Houston. I've been watching but couldn't log into my account to chat using another one. I do rehair and repairs out here. Hope to make a bow one day. Thank you for the videos.
Love to have you come to Learning Trade Secrets one of these times. Okay, so got my planes ready to go. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to plane down the stick, and we want to align the head of the bow and the frog. And so the way to do this is you look at the stick and you get equal amounts of the lower part of the head on the from the stick, and then without moving anything, you look down at the frog and you do the same. And I'm doing this with one eye closed. Okay, so then I'm going to see where I need to remove wood and make a pencil mark here so I know where I'm going to be. Okay. It's a little bit more blade out. This is one of those chores that the last thing you want to do is hurry up and make a mess. There's really not a whole lot of room to make a mistake here. The butt of the stick's getting closer to the finished size. Okay, I'll check again, see how we're doing. Okay. Take this side down a little more. Let me see if I can get some more light on this subject here with this.
You're still trying to keep it centered on the stick as you fit it, right?
Yeah. And I put some shellac on here so you can see the contrast between where I'm planing and where I haven't planed yet. So one of the things that you have to be aware of too is it's very easy to plane more heavily in one area than another. You want to make sure that your frog not only fits to the stick, but it's also running parallel with the stick instead of going at an angle this way or this way. You want it to go right down the center, so you've got to be aware of that as well. Okay. We're zooming in on this. Got to get my glasses on here to see what I'm doing. Okay. Start working on the bottom facet here.
This is why you really want those inside corners of your underslide to be crisp, right?
Right. Not just the corners crisp, but also so that the if the underslide isn't straight here, a lot of times you check an older frog and put a straight edge on it, you can see that these edges weren't straight in the first place, and that's why they have alignment issues. Makes it very difficult for the eyelet to survive that. Start marking where I need to cut more. Plane up a little bit farther on the stick here because you can plane a bit of a hollow in this, and you want to get this material, which is going to go away anyways, want to get that out of the way. This is where, trying to plane these down, this is where it's super critical to have your plane set up well so that it's not cutting more on one side than the other, because let's say if you've got more blade out on this side than this side, as you're trying to cut it, it's going to continually cut more off of this side, so this thing rotates, and it just makes it much more difficult to keep track of what's going on. Okay, what we need to do here. Okay, getting really close. Going. All right, so I like that. So we'll do one more thing here. We're going to check and make sure that just this little section here where the frog fits, so you've got about less than 20 millimeters here from the back of the stick to the frog, you know, so to about there. So we're going to check and see, make sure that we've got some nice flat facets, so that all looks really good. Okay, next we're going to go ahead and we're going to square up the butt end. Using the bottom facet as a reference. Okay, that's good. Now I'll use my calipers just as parallels to check the other side.
Tim asked, is there any evidence that old masters used any other varnish other than shellac?
Well, a lot of people think that the earliest bows, they just oiled them. Put linseed oil or something like that on it. Alcohol that was had a high enough proof that you could make shellac with it was probably a pretty scarce item. So it might have just been easier to go ahead and oil it. And linseed oil, and you get a pretty firm film with that. So yeah, I don't know if anybody's really done any studies to see what's on them. They all have shellac on them now, so because that's what happens when they go in a violin shop. Okay, so now I have the sides squared up, and so now I want to make the butt of the stick the same thickness for about the first 10 or 15 centimeters. So 9.9 and 9.89, so that's close enough. Okay, And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get the bottom squared up to the bottom facet, or the top squared up to the bottom facet.
What is the purpose of squaring everything up?
So it's just part of the fitting of the frog. I'm going to go ahead and put this in a vise and mill the trench for the eyelet. So I need to have the sides of this parallel so that when I clamp it in the vise, it's not loose on one side and tight on the other. And the other reason you want to do the bottom facet here is when you do carve out that trench, you want to be working straight down. If it's off by 10 degrees, then you're actually making that mortise at an angle. You're probably not realizing you're doing that. So, and there's still plenty of material here. We're still well over, for 1.5 millimeters almost, oversized. So, okay, so we've got that squared up. So now what we're going to do is we're going to check the length of the bow again. There's my little... Okay. So make sure that we're not making our bow too long. That would be a bummer. So we're at 73.2. And I'm still long by 0.5 millimeter here. And so I'm going to make my nipple 1.5 millimeters. And the length of my mortise is, or the distance from the back of the stick to the front of, or back of the mortise is 17 millimeters, and then another 17 millimeters to the front of the mortise. And there's no rule or law that says that's what it's got to be, but that's just a couple of common dimensions there.
So from the back of the stick, you're not including the nipple?
Not including the nipple. So now what I want to do is I want to square up this end, have a nice clean surface to make some marks on it. It's one of the more pleasant sounds in bow making.
Tim asked, how long is a viola bow?
So violin bow and a viola bow, the most common lengths are 73 centimeters, and that's from the very end at the head to the button, not including the button. But if you look historically, you might find at least a centimeter difference shorter, rarely longer. So just, if you make them longer, often they don't fit in people's violin cases. That's kind of a bad thing to do. Okay, so now we're going to mark the length of the nipple. So we're going to go 1.5 millimeters. Okay. We need an ear rub here. Then you're going to have to go. Okay. Kate, can you help me out?
Yeah,
here?
come here, Croc.
Okay.
Croc.
So now we're going to just scribe a mark all the way around. Okay, now so I don't have to do any math. I just zero it out and make it my 17. Mark that on the bottom facet. And this is really one thing that you want to make sure that you're putting the mortise on the bottom facet. It's always not so good putting on a corner facet.
It's happened.
I've seen that happen, not in this shop, but elsewhere. Okay, and then another 17.
Jack
Okay.
asked, when you camber, do you go through the last part of the stick even until the bottom area? Or in other words, the camber starts from the very beginning of the stick?
So the camber goes right on through the butt of the stick, okay? By the time you get to the butt of the stick, it's pretty flat. I mean, there's barely a tenth of a millimeter. I don't know. Can you see any light underneath there?
I don't know.
It's a tiny amount, but you want that curve to continue over the top of the frog, because if it's just dead flat, when you tighten up the bow, you'll have a hump right where the frog is. So that aesthetically doesn't look very good. So now I've got my lengths marked. I need my knife. And so now I'm going to score these lines. Okay. I'll score around the butt of the stick.
Why would you score it like that?
I don't want it to tear out where the mark is, and just easier to see too. Okay, so then I'm going to take a pencil and I'm going to darken those marks a little bit so I know where to start and stop. Okay, and then I'm going to take my jeweler saw, and I'm going to, this blade width is just about not quite a millimeter, close. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to saw a kerf down about a millimeter on the outside of my mark. And so that will help when I make the nipple. It'll help keep that area from splitting out. Go a little deeper here on the corners because it's so big.
Brett Stillers wrote, greatly appreciating everything you and Kate are doing. Thank you for showing all of us the right way to do proper bow work.
Well, just remember there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, and there's also a lot of ways to make bows. When I started, I first was a student at the violin making school in Chicago, graduated from the school, and then I worked with John Norwood Lee in Chicago for 3.5 years, and then set up my own shop here in Ohio in 1985, and then was involved a lot with the Violin Society, started going to the Oberlin workshop with Vahaka Nigogosian. I was teaching rehairs for a week there, and then we started the Oberlin bow workshop. So I was very fortunate to have a chance to watch people like Stefan Thomas Show and Eric Granchomp and Mitsuhaki Sasano, some really talented makers. Watch them make stuff. So what I'm doing is kind of a conglomeration of everything that I've learned along the way. So I'm going to step away from the camera just for a second here, and I'm going to go ahead and mill this trench. So I will be right back.
somebody didn't have a mill to be able to do that, how would you recommend it?
Well, you're just going to start with a chisel and start cutting down and across, and it takes time. And for today, I'm just going to do it with the mill. So now I want to go ahead. I've got this elongated oval here, and I'm going to go ahead and square this all up now. The depth of this eyelet mortise is about 6 millimeters. I make it as shallow as I possibly can, enough room for the eyelet, and that's it. So that we have room for you just have more strength in the bow if you leave more material. When you look at a lot of old French bows, it's very common, more likely than not, that the mortise is actually wider than the bottom facet. And I think maybe when they made this mortise, they made it before they fit their frog, and so they didn't really have the width of the mortise, or the width of the bottom facet, as a guide to the width, and then went ahead and fit it. So the mortise is much wider than it needs to be. We can clean this up with a chisel here, square it up.
Jack asked if later we could post a photo of the milling machine on our Facebook page.
Sure. Nothing special. It's just it's a MCO, so it's Taiwanese, maybe Chinese.
Is it from maybe the 80s?
I got it in the 80s. The company's owned by MSC, but everybody makes a copy of this machine. It's called a mill drill, milling machine, or a drill press, sort of a heavy duty drill press.
But you wouldn't need something that.
No, if I were gonna buy a little milling machine right now, I would buy one a TEG. They're really simple. They're small. You can set it up here in your desk and do something with it, and then go put it on a shelf. They have inexpensive digital readouts that you can put on it pretty easily, so you can sort of micro adjust the depth of cut. So it's a pretty useful little machine. They also have a little lathe as well. Make this just a little bit longer.
I think everybody can hear glue.
Yeah, we got some extra wildlife in the shop here today. We've got
Wesley, you want to bring them down so everybody knows what that sound belongs to? Sure.
okay. Pretty close here. Yeah, what we got going on here?
Bet you
All right.
didn't know guinea pigs made sounds.
Yeah. Okay.
They can make a lot of
Enough of the guinea pig.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and mark out the butt of the stick and drill the hole.
Fun with homeschooling.
So, finished dimension of the butt of the stick is gonna be 8.5. So it'd be really wonderful if we could just drill it perfectly at the middle of that 8.5, but doing it by hand, you're going to be off a little bit. So we are going to compensate, and we're going to make it a little bit lower, and so that once we drill the hole, we can realign the butt of the stick around the hole in the nipple. So I'm going to, so half of the butt of the stick would be 4.25, and I'm going to make it about 2/10 bigger. And so I'm going to mark it the bottom, from the bottom facet, and then the side facet, the corner facet, sorry, on the bottom, and the corner facet on the bottom. So we've got those 3 lines on there. It's going to be super hard for you to see that. If you, I doubt you can.
Let's see if we can try.
Okay, so now I got a little star there. So clean this up a little bit.
Dennis asked, how sharp do you leave the sides of the mortise?
Yeah, you leave it to a nice feather edge there, and that's one of the reasons I think it was, if you're cutting out that big wide mortise with the, after you fit the frog, it's really hard to keep a nice straight and clean feather edge on that mortise. So
Do you keep that feather edge, or do you knock it down?
yeah, I leave that feather edge. I don't file it down. I want to leave as much material around that mortise as possible to keep it strong. So now that I've got this little star here, I'm going to take my scribe, stick it in the end, and I'm going to hold it up like this, and I want to have that scribe standing dead straight up on the stick here. So I'm going to have to manipulate it a little bit.
And why do you...
We'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get there. Be patient. Okay, so now I'm going to take my calipers and I'm going to measure like this, 5.58, 5.3. So I'm not quite in the center, so I'm going to have to move it a little bit towards this corner facet. So I'll just kind of mush it over sideways there and try again. That's why it needs to be straight up and down so that we get a good measurement. So what do we got? Still 5.5 and still 3.5. I had a little glue on there. I have to get that off. I am 5, 4, 7, and 5. So I'm pretty close. Just sheet it over just a little bit more. Okay. All right. So now, get my bow drill out. My drill bits. Okay, so I'm going to use a center drill or a combination drill. I can't have them here, Kate.
Crocodile, come here.
Wesley, take Crocodile outside for me, please. Please.
Okay, there's that. And the bow. Okay, so I'm going to put that in there. And I'm going to go backwards first to kind of get it in that hole. And that the problem is that if the drill bit grabs, it can pull itself out of the center.
What we call
So
traveling.
it'll travel a little bit. So I want to be real careful here. First,
Tim asked, what do you think about the bow badger?
if I didn't have a lathe and yeah, I have a lathe, I have this, it makes more sense to use these tools. So, okay, so I'm just gonna check this here and make sure that we got a good start. So 3.2, 3.2, wow, we're right down the center. Okay, we'll go in a little farther here. Okay, so now we want to be able to check it and see how straight it is.
I have one over
I got it. Okay. So I have my dowel pin here. And I'm going to put it in the hole. And then I'm going to sight down it. I'm going to go right down the... So I want it to be parallel to the sides and then parallel to the bottom. And we're darn close on this. Another way you can check it is to check it like this to see how parallel that is and then compare it to both sides. So if you don't trust your eye, this is another way to sort of optically prepare it. And so it's a little bit angled going this way, so I have to correct that just a little bit.
When I do it, I only use the straight edge because I don't trust my eyes at all.
So one of the things that I do is a lot of guys would just switch over to a regular drill bit here, and I actually like using this center drill to drill the hole, the entire hole, because I can steer this a little bit better than I can with a regular drill bit. If you had a regular drill bit and you started to go at an angle, say, then you would start to make the hole egg-shaped. So this is just one way to kind of eliminate that as a possibility. That hole's not going to be any bigger than we want it. Okay, check it again. Okay. The grain of this wood really loves to steer this drill bit, so you've got to tell it who's boss. Okay, Okay, looks good. That's gonna come up now. Hopefully by the time you poke it out into the mortise, it's where it's supposed to be. Better look again. Okay, gotta go back.
Dennis asked, did you make your center drill or purchase it?
This is an 1/8 inch center drill, and it's ever so slightly oversized for doing 3mm screws. I use an 1/8 inch screw, so obviously it works out perfectly for me. It's actually, sometimes the hole's actually maybe a little snug.
Where did you get it from?
Center drills are easy to find, and any machine tool company will have it, but MSC MSC has them. And this one is 3 inches long. And again, this job takes as long as it takes, and you really have to get it zeroed in, or you're going to get in trouble. And of course, the farther in you go, the more likely you're going to be able to keep it going straight. On these German bass bows, this is only 17mm. German bass bow, that hole is maybe even 4 centimeters long. It's a chore.
Jack asked, is an 1/8 inch drill bit mean a 3.17mm?
I guess, whatever, I don't, 2.17. Yeah, it's slightly bigger than a 3mm bit. Okay, now I have a drill that I've made to drill out the second hole, and this is just made out of 1/8 inch drill rod stock, and I've turned it down to the same size as my button or my screw minus the threads. So I want to keep this the biggest bearing it can be, so I don't trim it down any smaller than just to remove the threads. And that's just got a little brad point on it, just a simple little spade bit. So we'll see how it fits here. I might have to, yeah, we're good. Sometimes it's a little snug, so you have to clean up that hole a little bit with a regular drill bit.
Can you face that mortise towards us? So you can see it goes all the way through.
Okay. So that's done. So the next step is to drill out the nipple. And this is one tool that we do sell. We have a bunch of them.
I'll put a link in the description below where you can buy it.
Glasses to see how close we're getting here. I've only ever split one bow, so 1 out of 1,000. I guess it's not bad odds. Hated it, but so be it. Okay, so now we've got that cut down. And let's see how we did with our fit here. Nice. All right. So we're going to do one more thing with this before we put it away, and that is when you're going to drill a 4mm hole to get the mortise started here. So drop my calipers on the floor here. So my mortise placement for the head is minimum 4mm from the back. It's half the width of the head, and it's 6mm long. So it's 4, 5, and 6 long. Does that make sense? Could draw that out on a piece of paper for you if you like. Okay, so that means that the middle of my mortise should be at 7. So let's scribe a line there. And 5mm. Okay, X marks the spot. That's too small. That's all right. Okay, put a nice pinprick in there, and then I need my drills. These are all spade bits that we've made. They used to be countersink drills made by Stanley. Just a super crude set, and you're able to just anneal them and then return them on a lathe, and they work pretty well. Okay, so here we're going to go ahead and put this hole in here, and you really do want this dead center in the middle of your head. And so we're going to go in somewhere around, I don't know, maybe 6mm. You could go a little, depends, you can go a little deeper. If you got a really heavy bow, you might make the mortise just a tiny bit bigger to compensate for that extra weight. Okay, so let's do a little cleanup here. goes away, these.
We're at 55 minutes.
Oh, great. So why don't we stop right here? Or should we go for another 5 minutes, Kate? And,
Let's go ahead and stop.
okay. So the next thing we're gonna do when we come back is we're going to drill a hole in the frog for the eyelet. And then we are going to make sure the eyelet will go up and down the mortise without catching on anything. So there's plenty of room. That's something I do too for if I'm doing an eyelet replacement. Before you put the eyelet in the frog, make sure the eyelet works in the mortise. A lot of times they're a little chunky or tall and you need to adjust them a little bit. So I leave these as big as I can. These are the ones again from Bowworks from David Werther, and they're really, really nice eyelets. All right. We'll see you at, what do you want to do?
1:15.
1:15. We'll see you then.
Okay.
All right.